fill in the blank. You're not getting any younger, so
be easy on yourself. Give yourself a break.
Hey you! Yes, you! Welcome to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast, a podcast for people who want to disrupt their lives for a good reason, to make it count. I'm your host, Jen Glantz, and every week I'll drop a new episode with stories from real people just like you, who woke up one morning and decided to make big changes, starting with small things. We'll cover topics like entrepreneurship, love, failure, and self-care. Hey, you're not getting any younger, so let's make this an adventure. Ready? Hey, any youngers. It's me, your host, Jen Glantz. Welcome back to another episode of the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast. I'm just going to dive right into this week's topic because it is a bit heavy. For some, it might be a little bit uncomfortable, so I want to just pause and say that this episode might be a bit of a trigger for some. It is around the topic of suicide. It's an issue that we see popping up in the news quite often over the past couple of years, and maybe this topic has affected you and your own life and in a personal way. Maybe somebody you know committed suicide, or maybe it's something that you have heard friends talk about, and maybe it's just that you know someone in your town. But regardless, when I heard about this week's guest, April Peck, I knew I had to have her on the show. I lost a friend to suicide a couple of years ago. This was somebody that I worked with. They were a freelancer at a job I worked for. This was probably 6 years ago. And I loved this person. This person, when they came into the room, they lit up the entire room. They would give you the kind of hug that would literally sweep you off your feet. Like when he hugged me, he would sweep me off my feet, and we just had the best kind of friendship. So much fun, always made everyone laugh. He was a freelancer, so when he would come into our office to do work for that week, everyone would be so happy to see him. And when I heard about his suicide, I was shocked because to me, this person was the happiest person I knew, or at least it seemed like that from the outside. This person was someone who everyone loved, like their roster of friends was so incredibly long. But yet this person was also someone struggling internally and nobody knew. And I was devastated by this. And of course, you feel a sense of shame. You feel a sense of how did I not realize? But also you start to realize that maybe you don't know anything about suicide and you don't know what people are going through. And, it's a topic that is uncomfortable to talk about. Even talking about it right now, I'm uncomfortable because I don't know the right words to say. Another friend of mine lost her dad to suicide, and, she was talking about it to me. And there are some things that people don't realize about it and don't speak about. And it's time that we shine a light on it. So if this episode is triggering for you, you might want to pass on it. But if you are open to hearing April's story and learning more about this topic, then I think you're going to get a lot out of this episode. Let me tell you more about April. April Peck is a beauty entrepreneur. She is a busy mother of 3, a wellness advocate, and is passionate about empowering people. April started the brand Save Me From because she believes a lot in a great hair day and how it can empower people. Save Me From are hair products. And she also wanted to do something to advocate for suicide prevention. After losing her sister to suicide, she was determined to find a way to save others from suffering that same fate. Although suicides are more common, they are never normal and always preventable, she says. She found experts in social work and became a trained instructor on suicide prevention to empower others how to respond when someone is in a crisis. She says, since hair is a main source of self-expression, it can significantly affect our self-image, improve empowerment, and transform our lives, and that's why she started this hair care company, Save Me From. They donate 10% of their income, their net income, to organizations who help save people in real crisis. On the show today, we talk about her story. We talk about what it was like to lose her sister. And she tells me that suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. For every suicide that happens, at least 6 other people are affected deeply by this. I really hope that when you listen to this episode, you learn something new about this topic, you find yourself feeling a little bit less uncomfortable about talking about it, and maybe even doing some more research on the topic of suicide and how we can help others who are going through crisis, and also understand some of the signs of a person who might be thinking about suicide as well. So I'm giving you this week's episode. It's a heavy one. It's a tough topic to talk about, but I really think we need to do it. All my love, Jen Glantz. Today's episode is brought to you by the You're Not Getting Any Younger Facebook group. Whether this is your first time listening to the podcast or you are an MVP and have listened from the start, come join us on Facebook. We have a secret free Facebook group. If you search groups in Facebook, you will find the You're Not Getting Any Younger Facebook group. Over 1,400 incredible, fascinating, helpful humans are there, starting conversations, answering questions, helping each other out, and most of all, just making sure that we are all squeezing the most we can out of this one shot we have at our lives. So if you're feeling alone, you need a boost of motivation, or you just want to connect with like-minded people, go to Facebook, search groups, and search You're Not Getting Any Younger. We're there for you. Thank you so much for being on the show today. My first question for you is going to be a little bit tricky, actually. Just if you were going to a party, how would you describe yourself and what you do?
Oh, well, I am. So for me, I tend to be one of those. I recently just went to iSpa, and they were talking about different personality traits, and so I'm kind of bringing this up first because, there's the extroverts and the introverts, but there's actually someone in between. I believe it's called a amtrovert, and I could have that completely wrong. And I would say that's what I am, is that I tend to seem like I'm an extrovert when I'm in a kind of a business or a party setting. I work up the strength to kind of be more outgoing. But really, I just want to go and cuddle and watch a show with my kids and be on the couch. But how I describe myself as I'm April, and I guess it depends on the party setting. I don't know. This is a hard question.
I know, and I feel like I promised you it wasn't going to be a hard question, but it is. It is tricky. But by the way, if introvert is not the real word, you should trademark that and run with that, because I want to call myself an introvert. That's like the best in-between word for introvert and extrovert.
Yeah, right? Isn't it?
I love it. And I'm in that category too. Like I could go out, but that I also secretly just want to be on my home doing nothing. So I love it. Well, why don't you start off by telling us about Save Me From? And did you always want to be an entrepreneur? Was that something you always wanted to do? And if not, what made you want to start a company?
Yeah. So Save Me From is this great damage-specific hair care collection where we're helping to save hair and save lives. We donate 10% net income to help with raising awareness for suicide prevention, but not only financially are we trying to raise, giving a financial donation, we really want to make sure that every stylist is trained on QPR. And so that's one of the initiatives we're really trying to work with right now. And I can talk about QPR later, but as far as always wanting to be an entrepreneur, I would say no. I mean, in my life, when I was a child, I always had this dream of being a lawyer. I went to school, I worked as I went to school, and I always did sales. As I was going through school, I always would have these different sales types of jobs. And so right out of school, I decided, I'm not going to go to law school right away. I've worked too much. I've not slept enough to go back to school again and have to pay for it. So what I did was I went into pharmaceutical sales and nutritional supplement sales. So I had two different jobs as I was, preparing for the LSAT and going to law school. And so the supplement sales job was the one that came first. And then I finally got the pharmaceutical sales job. And both of those were great they were great for me because I liked sales, but they were also great for me because they kind of nurtured my passion for health and wellness. And so I learned a lot about different supplements and things that were out there. And that's always been something that I've been inspired by, is, how to really get your body to work optimally. And so the supplement company was great. And then when I transferred over to pharmaceutical sales, it's ironic for me to look back on that now and realize that the pharmaceuticals that I was a rep for was Cymbalta, which is an antidepressant. And now that I kind of look back at suicide and what leads, 90% of people who die by suicide have some sort of mental health illness, or in that time frame that they do that. And I could be having that quote wrong, but I believe that that's accurate. So it's just interesting to me that I was a rep for Eli Lilly and Cymbalta, and now I'm an entrepreneur. And after that, me and my husband founded Hydropeptide, which is an advanced skincare line. And now we are on to Save Me From, which is a clean, luxurious, results-driven hair care. Did I answer everything that you wanted me to there?
Yeah, and this is like if I met you at a party, I would be like, listen, April, you're not going anywhere. I have 1,000 questions for you, which is why I'm so happy you're on this podcast. I mean, it's crazy because your journey is something that was so unpredictable, and, we all think we know what our path is, and then we stumble upon a side job or a job that just takes us to a whole different direction. And I want to talk about that a little bit more, but I also do want to talk about the topic of suicide. It is a topic that makes people uncomfortable. It's a topic that people do not want to talk about. It's a topic that people brush under the table, and I want us to shine a light on it. So I want to hear from you a little bit about how you got involved in becoming someone who is a trained instructor on suicide prevention, and why this is something that means so much to you.
Yeah. Well, so unfortunately, I'm a daughter of, I have 5 sisters, and I'm a middle child. And unfortunately, during my time at Hydropeptide, the last years that me and my husband exited that company, and in the last year we were there, I had just found out I was pregnant with my daughter. So I have 3 children, 2 boys, and now a young girl. But I got a call from my brother-in-law, in fact, who is a police officer in the area, where my sister, my youngest baby sister, had just, and I'm going to say initially, attempted to take her life, and was on life support. He said, "You have to come right now. You have to be here." And so my sister, who was a single mother of 3 young children, she was already an adult, had taken her life. And when I got to Southern Oregon, where she was, we flew down from Seattle. It was an eerie feeling that as we were flying down, we were on the same plane as the life support team was, that, we thought was probably going to see my sister, and they were, on the same car ride and everything to get to where she was. But my sister, what got me into wanting to know more about suicide prevention was the loss of my sister and her taking her life. And as I wanted to celebrate this joy of being pregnant with my daughter, I also was really sad that I was losing my youngest sister, who, we had so many memories of doing her hair and dancing and just creating all these different things. And she, being a mother also of 3 young girls, I was, and they were being torn apart in their families because they had different fathers. I after losing her, I went online and researching, what is their life going to be like? What are the chances of them thinking the same thing that their mother did, and contemplating suicide, and knowing that they have a hard life, because me and my 5 sisters, we had a hard life, and part of me understood why my sister acted in the way that she did. To be honest, we had lost a grandma to suicide, and one of my other sisters had attempted suicide. So suicide wasn't something, it was something that was affecting my life, and I was just beginning to realize how much it was. how many people it was affecting, and really wanting to do more. And as we looked at my sister's social media, we could see that there was signs there. Hindsight is 2020. And if we only knew that those things that she was saying on social media were maybe her asking for help, hoping that someone realized it and recognized it, we could have done more for her. And so I knew that Hydropeptide, the line that I was the founder of, wasn't the right platform to kind of take our mission and do more. And I talked to my husband about, doing something in a much broader level and really loving the beauty industry. We knew that we could make a bigger impact in helping people to understand that we all can be first responders to people who are showing signs of suicide, who are having these moments of crisis. They say that it's about 3 months period of time that people will really contemplate suicide. And when I say contemplate, they're thinking about it, but then they're also devising a plan. And so what we wanted to do was to be able to, we went to research and we saw QPR, which QPR is this amazing platform. It was created by Dr. Quinnett. He's a psychologist in the Spokane area, so Eastern Washington. And it's this renowned training platform that helps every average citizen know how they can respond to in a mental health crisis. And so QPR stands for question, persuade, refer. And so we heard about QPR and we wanted to expand upon that as well and bring that to every household. But we really wanted to start with salon and spa professionals, because how many times are you sitting in someone's chair and you're having a hard time, and we're just sharing our deepest secrets that we don't even share with our husband or best friend about what's happening in our life, and it's usually that stylist. So we wanted to do more on a bigger and deeper level, just because of the experience of the loss of my sister and just how suicide has affected my family as a whole.
I just want to say thank you so much for sharing the story and for being so open about the pain of losing your sister, and about a topic that does affect so many people, and yet so many people will not talk openly about. So I'm very grateful for you sharing this and letting us in on this journey that you've had. And I think it's incredible, this QPR platform, because I want to say, I think I've experienced this too, that people run away when they know something is wrong, when they know people in their life are struggling. Some people will run in the opposite direction. So I want you to share with people what they can do if somebody in their life is showing some of those signs. And can you let us in on what some of those signs can be, and then also what somebody can do if they notice somebody is showing those signs?
Yes. So I'll kind of start off with the signs, and then kind of just, here are the signs that you can have, and like the questions that you can ask. So really, when someone is showing signs of suicide, there's a number of different risk factors, right? A lot of times we'll get clues. Sometimes there's direct clues and sometimes there's indirect clues. But some of the direct clues, right, is when someone says, I just want to end my life, or I don't want to be here anymore. And I can say that I have been guilty of this. A lot of times you'll say, oh, don't say that, right? You don't mean that. Don't say that. So a lot of times when people are actually giving us clues that they're contemplating suicide, we will actually almost respond with them with ridicule. And I had to actually look up the definition of ridicule, because ridicule, the definition is that you don't take, I don't remember the exact definition of ridicule, but it is ridiculing them by not really taking what they're saying seriously. And so with QPR, we take every suicide clue, or every time that someone says that, hey, they're thinking about ending their life, or giving us clues, seriously. You have to take every single one seriously. But people will say these different clues, and sometimes there's direct, like I've decided to kill myself, or I wish I was dead. But then there's those coded clues like, I just want out, or I'm tired of my life, I can't go on. You'll start to notice changes in their behavior. So maybe someone will have bought a gun out of the blue, or they'll start stockpiling pills, or maybe they'll have, they'll kind of have this immediate change in their life. Like maybe things were kind of all out of order, but then all of a sudden things start to be within order, where they're starting to put together things and starting to give away things that they used to do all the time, they're no longer doing, right? So there's different behavioral clues like that. Then there's other situational clues, and those are things like, someone going through a breakup or getting a divorce. A lot of times one of the things that we always think of is those people who excel at everything, that they're not at risk. They have everything in their life going great for them. But those are some of the people that fall the hardest. White middle-aged men are some of the ones who have one of the higher risk factors, or have a higher rate of suicide. Our elderly have a high rate of suicide. Our veterans have a high rate of suicide. And our young people are starting to increase in their rate of suicide as well. So everyone is at risk. And everyone, when you see or hear these direct or indirect clues, or we see these behavioral clues, or we see situational clues like just getting fired, loss of a relationship, loss of maybe a death in the family that's very significant. Those are all things that should trigger, what's going on in this person's life. And if you're thinking that they're contemplating suicide, the fact is asking the question isn't going to make them think about it. It actually helps them. If you're thinking it, they're probably already thinking of suicide. And so it's important that we create an environment that we're going to ask them, hey, I've been noticing that you've been really unhappy lately. Are you so unhappy that you're thinking of ending your life, or that you're contemplating suicide? And I think that's one of the most uncomfortable things to ask. But it's one of the biggest things that we can do to really help our friends, our family, and those people around us that we're seeing, that we sit down with them, giving them our undivided attention and asking them that question.
Wow. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I just appreciate you breaking all of this down, because again, people who are listening to this, I guarantee you there are going to be people listening to this who need to hear this. And if sitting someone down and asking that question is something that a person feels they're not able to do for whatever reason, is there another option where they can find other types of professional help to bring in for that person? Not even talking about an intervention, but is there another option if that person, for whatever reason, feels like they can't sit a person down and say that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the biggest things about realizing in QPR, so QPR is asking the question first, right? Persuading that person to getting help, and then referring them to someone. But in QPR, you really need to create, or for successful suicide prevention, you really need to create a team. Because it's not just one question, one and done, and that person is better. We know that that's not how life works, that the problems that lead up to someone contemplating suicide as the only option left for their life is a long one and a complicated one, and one where they've endured a lot of pain. And so we have to sit and realize that as they're talking, not having judgment and hearing them out. But you should cultivate a team. You can always say, hey, find someone else, or find someone else that you think will be able to, who's close in that network, and say, I've noticed this, this, and this. I think we should talk to whomever it is that you feel is having this issue, and then ask them the question. But before you ask that question, you really need to make sure that you also have resources available, so that if they are saying, hey, I am contemplating suicide, then you can say, okay, how, when will you go with me for help? And then act on that quickly. And so it's important you know what resources are available for you in your community to take them to. One thing that we're really excited about is the new 988 emergency mental health number that is being rolled out. And I don't think that that's fully implemented yet, but it was just signed on to be a new number. Just like there's 911, there's now 988. So you no longer have to memorize a whole 1-800 number to get that emergency suicide prevention help, but you have a 3-digit code that you can call.
Wow, that's something that I think needs to happen immediately. That's incredible that that is something that is going to happen, and I'm happy to hear that. And I'm thinking about I lost someone to suicide maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and it was someone that I was an acquaintance with, someone that I had worked with, and it was just like you said, it was a person who on paper looked like he was living his best life. And whenever I was around him, I felt like he was the happiest person I knew. And I constantly think about him and I constantly think about our interactions and wonder if there was any sign that I missed or if I saw it very clearly, but I just chose to be ignorant about it. So when you mention that there's people who, we wouldn't even think are suffering, what can we do for that? I mean, is there just something? Because I think about my situation constantly and how did I see anything or did I just not? So in situations like that where maybe we don't know a person is going through anything, is there just something we can do for our close networks in general to let people know that we are here if they need someone to talk to or to help them?
Yeah, I mean, I think just in general, those are things that first off, I'm so sorry for the loss of your friend. It's always hard, and it's always hard to go through. And I think it's always hard to think of what could I have done. We're always going to have those thoughts. We all want to, we all want to help other people. I think we all have some bit of perfectionism in us, right? That we're like, well, what can we do? We want to control the outcome of things. And we always have to remember the person who can ultimately stop a suicide is the person who's thinking about a suicide. So we can't beat ourselves up for the loss that happens around us. But what we could do is always try harder to be there and do more. And so it's always going to be hard. And it's always important that we're all getting the care that we need too, that we have that self-care. If you lose someone that's really close to you, even if someone who is a coworker, like you're mentioning, and it does deeply trouble us that we are getting that crisis intervention for ourselves. But I think it's just like you said, like we have to sit, we have to listen, we have to make sure that they are okay, that we're, I think just in general, kinder to people. There's social media that can sometimes be really cruel. I mean, I see people post something that they mean to be lighthearted and fun, and sometimes it's completely taken out of what that person meant, out of their context. And so just in general, I think the world needs to be nicer.
Yeah, I agree with you fully. And I think there's just little changes all of us could make to show even our friends and people in our environment right now that we do have time for them. I think about myself and how many people reach out to me and I forget to write them back or I forget to hang out with them and give them that safe space. And I just think that there's so much we can do for each other just to open up those boundaries. And this is why I appreciate everything you're saying, is because you're having these open and honest conversations that a lot of people will run away from because they are uncomfortable and they are not something that are naturally ingrained in our heads to talk about. When we went to school, we weren't raised on mental health. We weren't talked about, people didn't tell us that was something we should talk about. And I think the world is changing in a good direction with that. But even people right now who are raising kids, bringing children into the world, what kind of things can they do to teach them mental health and to open these boundaries with them?
Yeah, this is, so I have 3 young children, and they all had birthdays recently, so I have to remember what their new ages are. But 11, 9, and 6. And I have to be honest, sometimes my oldest will say things because we're hard on him. We want them to do well. We put a lot of pressure on them. And sometimes I just have to take a big step back and just remember who they are and what they're doing and how much I love them. And do they know that I have unconditional love for them, no matter what they do or the mistakes they make. But there was recently a speaker who came into our area, and I wasn't able to go, but my son was able to go. And he talked about, it's called Save the Children. And he has a TED Talk that was great. So I wasn't able to go. My son went with his friend, but a lot of people in my church community went. And this Save the Children platform was so great for me. I listened to it first, and then I had my husband listen to it. But I only listened to it after my son came to me and said, Mom, I've been wanting a phone lately, but I don't anymore.
Wow.
I would like to play, a video game maybe on your phone on one time on the weekend. But if he was telling me all these stories that this host, this person who is talking about Save the Children, was talking about, our phones and how we have to really train our children about phones and like what it can do and how to use social media. And their brains are still developing, and some of the things that are happening on our phones. And, I'm not the expert in this, but I am a mom and I care about my children. And I can see that when they are on electronics quite a bit, they do react in a different way. And so having my son watch it at, I think, a good age, he was 11, so he could recognize what this person was saying was true. In him understanding that, I can understand that when I'm on my mom's phone or I'm hearing these other stories, I can see how this can happen. But I think we just really need to be parents to our children, make sure that we're taking these devices that we're giving to them and training them on it, following up on it, and then also showing our kids that we love them no matter what, that they can come talk to us when they do make a mistake or something happens, that none of us are perfect. And that if they are kind of giving us these signs, they say certain things that are indirect and coded, that we're there for them and that we are getting them the help they need, because mental health is important. We all have mental health and we all have mental wellness that we need to make sure that we're nurturing.
Yeah, and I want to talk about, people individually. When I started going to therapy a couple of years ago, I wanted to be as open as I could about it, because there's another huge stigma around that. And what are some options for anybody listening to the show for help that they can get with their mental health or just their continuing mental wellness?
Yeah. I think having a therapist is great. I will be honest that I have not gone to a therapist, but I have on my team someone who has her master in social work. And a couple weeks ago, she actually sat me down and she was like, April, we need to talk about a few things that are happening in your life. Just from feeling overwhelmed, right?
Yeah.
I'm a type A personality. I
Yep.
try to carry on a lot. And, she sat me down and brought tears to my eyes. So sometimes having those things is really important, being able to talk about the things that are affecting us and putting together processes and things that aren't going to happen overnight, right? It's just like working out. So I am passionate about health and wellness. I was a fitness instructor. But when you build a muscle, that muscle doesn't build overnight. You don't get stronger overnight. It's daily things that you put into place that is going to make the way that you perceive things that are happening to you, the way that you're responding to things that are happening to you. It takes practice in conditioning. And so, and in fact, I actually was on a plane recently and read something. Russell Wilson is our quarterback for the Seahawks here. He had mentioned something about how he goes through mental health conditioning in an article. And it was something that I was like, I want to figure out what that is. You know, we need to be doing more of this mental health conditioning, not only making our bodies stronger, but our minds stronger. I think it's important to do.
I love it, and I'm writing down to find this article. I'm going to share this article on social media because, I love the Seahawks, by the way. They have a couple of players on the team from my college, so I've been following them closely, and I love the coach, Pete Carroll, so big Seahawks fan, but also I love that. I mean, look, you're right. I spend so much time in the gym working on my fitness and just, going to the gym. I don't spend any time doing mental conditioning. So
Yeah.
I think that that's such a fascinating thing when it comes to people choosing how they invest their time. And to be honest with you, I'm taking a lesson from your son because I spend so much time on social media and I get off of it and I feel horrible and I don't feel happy. And a lot of the time I waste on this device, I should be putting into something like a mental conditioning. So you should tell your son that some of his words of wisdom that he took from this is very applicable to people of any age who are finding themselves doing some sort of habit or on social media and it's not making them feel the way that they want to feel when they're done with it.
Yeah. No, thank you. I mean, I agree. And I will have to actually say, go to YouTube or go to the TED Talk,
Yes.
Save the Children. But at the end of it, it did turn it to, we have to save the parents first.
I know that's my fear about having a kid is I have to get rid of these bad behaviors because I live my life on my phone and it's not good and I don't need to. It's not like I have to. It's just an addicting habit. So I want to make myself a better role model as well because I know if anyone was watching me, I'm not setting a good example. And yeah, I think that's a brilliant TED Talk and I think I'm taking so much away from what happened with your son and what he said to you. I think that's so powerful. So April, you have been amazing. Thank you so much. I want to end this interview like we end them all. I always say, fill in the blank. You're not getting any younger. So
Be easy on yourself. Give yourself a break.
I love that. April, you are wonderful. Please tell our listeners where they can find out more about you and Save Me From.
Yes, please go to savemefrom.com. You will learn more about our amazing hair care that helps to save your hair from damage, but then also in the blog or in the lab is our blog where you can also learn about more of what we're doing to help with suicide prevention.
I really appreciate this, April. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, too. I appreciate it.
Hey, you. Thank you for listening to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast. There are hundreds of thousands of pods out there, so thank you for listening to this one. You can find the show notes for this week's episode up on our website, anyyounger.com. Subscribe, rate, and review the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast on iTunes so that other ears around the world can listen too. Oh, and join our secret You're Not Getting Any Younger Facebook group, where over 1,000 people are talking about how to disrupt their lives, for a good reason, to make it count. Until next week, all my love, Jen Glantz.